good morning, good afternoon, good evening, I guess, to some of you. I am honestly so excited to talk with some of my not only like favorite people, but also some of the cooler contributors to the things that we're seeing in AI right now. And so I'm so appreciative. Harnham is so appreciative. Hopefully, you have people who are listening in who are so appreciative from respective companies, all of that good stuff. But I wanted to bring you guys together today to talk about the state and future of AI, right? We see it all the time. We hear about it all the time. You guys work in it all the time as well. And so I'm going to keep my intro really short and sweet, hopefully, and then get on to you. As to be honest, you guys are going to be doing the bulk of the chatting today because the way I see it is I have a little bit less to offer this conversation as people who are just hiring people in this space when you are the ones who are the huge contributors. So I really do appreciate you guys joining. My name is Sam. I work here at Harnham. Harnham is the global leader in data and analytics and AI recruitment, working across North America as well as through areas of Europe as well. And so my job here is specifically placing talent within the kind of more machine learning and AI space. And I've had I guess the good grace, I don't know the word to use, but I've had the luck to get to work with each of you guys on a different level over the last handful of years. So with that being said, I'm really curious to hear everybody's thoughts, but thought we would start with introductions. I've gotten to work with Hunter Powers for a good couple of years now. Has done some really awesome work in the space, and I'll let Hunter kind of introduce himself, and then we'll get right into the other speakers, and then right into the conversation. Hunter, you want to introduce yourself really quickly?
Sure thing. Glad to be here. I am Hunter Powers, a lifelong technologist, startup junkie. I've been in the startups tech space for the last 20 plus years. I've been in startup leadership positions the last 10 plus years. Now, probably the last 6 plus of those 10 years have been really focused on AI, and that just keeps accelerating. So I'm happy to join the conversation today.
Yep, and we're so appreciated as well. And not to say that Ted and Julianna don't have great names, but Hunter Powers has got to be one of the better names in the AI
All right,
space
I'll
as
take
well.
that. Thank
So,
you.
yeah, good, absolutely. Julianna, introduce yourself. I'm so excited to see you and to get to do our more health tech side of things as well as we have some people from different spaces. But I'm so happy to have you on that side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be here. So I joined Proscia. I'm with Proscia now and joined in 2018 and built the AI team here. I currently serve as Proscia's Vice President of AI R&D. And Proscia, just for a little bit of context for your audience, is a leading provider of digital and computational pathology solutions. So we deal with billion pixel images of tissue biopsies.
Heck yeah. No, I'm sure we'll have some questions that are going to be going more your direction along the way here. So super excited about that. And then finally, Ted, how do you explain yourself to the world? I've had a good relationship. Hopefully, he'll tell you if it's a good relationship. I would say a good relationship with Ted for a little while now. But Ted, introduce yourself. What can we know about Ted and
Yeah,
a
well, the
quick
fact that I'm
intro?
here tells you I do pick up the phone when you call.
Heck
So,
yeah, you are. There it is.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I've been sort of in the what we used to call the machine learning space for a while, starting in 2013 at a startup, and then 5 years at Uber, working mostly on sort of more traditional signal processing machine learning techniques, sort of through the advent of deep learning. I then got a PhD at Princeton in cognitive science, focused on language use because I thought that was sort of the next interesting question in terms of how AI could learn from humans. And then sort of the recent wave of autoregressive language modeling, like generative AI with language models, coincided nicely with that. And so I left the PhD or finished the PhD and started as a staff research engineer at Anthropic earlier last year. And I know Sam from
Nice.
building startups during my PhD, recruiting people.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Sure do. I think I saw Anthropic in the news recently, so that'll be good to talk now. So I'm sure we'll have some things to talk about with you as well. So I do want to kind of just to take you through how the conversation is going to go a little bit. We're going to kind of start about a lot more of trends and things that we're seeing and kind of picking everybody's brain here on trends, and then more move into kind of safe use cases, how it's going to affect the larger kind of AI climate, and then finally for people looking to get more involved, and that's how we're going to round it out. And so I do kind of want to start with you, Hunter, and kind of just talk about, and you kind of almost talked about it in your intro a little bit, but how are you seeing the AI space right now? Like what current trends, have you noticed shaping how we look at AI?
Yeah. I mean, well, I think the first thing is probably just explosive growth. That hockey stick growth that companies like to talk about is happening right now. And what does that mean? Is it just everything's constantly changing? There are new innovations every week, every other week, every day, and it's like it's almost impossible to keep up with. And these are new capabilities that we are now on the sort of precipice of applying AI to, or somewhere between the precipice and actually applying it. This, I guess, latest renaissance of AI seems to be spawned of the large language model or generative AI. That's the thing that's driving the most of it. Of course, that has a basis in transformers, and that goes all the way back to the 70s when AI first started, and then we got giant compute that came down and started allowing us to do more and more things. But this latest, I don't know. Well, I'll stick with the Renaissance term. Seems to be spawned by uh, the beginnings. I've also thought about like, well, what makes it different? Why is this different? What feels different about it? And I think it's that it started to feel a little bit human like the output that we're getting out of these models and the applications. For the first time, I feel less like you've just automated something and more like you have an actual human behind the scenes applying human-like logic and reasoning to give me a new output. And that's what I think is creating all of this energy, because people can see the promise, the premise, the concern that okay, now we can finally replace those pesky humans. But we can't yet quite maintain that humanhood for an extended period of times. But that's where the I don't know, the innovation is going, the new applications, and how long can we pretend to be a human in order to bring it from an idea all the way through to a completed product.
Oh, I love that. Wait, do we ask more questions or just go off what Hunter said and just kind of bat that around for the next hour? I mean, Hunter, I appreciate it. Right, we're looking at 50 years of trends into
Yeah,
that
man.
first minute and a half there.
It's a good time to be
Um,
alive.
It is, yeah, I know. Even if we do have to be one of those pesky humans, but it sure is. Well, I'm curious then, because Julianna, I want to come to you next then, right? Because trends in your world, I assume, look a little different. I'm not asking you to just speak about the world of Proscia, but these current trends that you've noticed shaping how we look at AI, what comes to mind?
Yeah, absolutely. Share some thoughts with Hunter and maybe some different ones too. Humans aren't so pesky from my end of things most of the time. Um, but yeah, I think Hunter's spot on that with the explosive terminology, like AI is having a moment. And a lot of that is fueled by large language models. I think everyone kind of like woke up. Everyone who wasn't paying attention kind of woke up when ChatGPT came about, and that sort of sparked a lot of realization of the promises of AI and how it can revolutionize really a lot of things in our lives. But from the health tech and from the life sciences perspective, I think we're seeing that like pharma companies and research organizations, health organizations are putting more resources into developing AI, and partly sparked by some of this sort of revolution in the fields.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't wait to get back to that because we're going to dig in a little bit more into kind of the health tech sides of things shortly. But I do kind of just want to move to Ted here for just 1 second. Ted, I'm sure you have no thoughts on the matter. Trends, nothing that you've noticed out
Yeah,
there.
I mean, I would say certainly my views are correlated. So, in general, I think a lot of the recent hype is driven by this. I like to think of it as amortization of compute. So you basically have parties pouring gigantic amounts of computation into these models, and it turns out what we saw starting with GPT-3 is that these systems are actually extremely general. So you're not just pouring compute into solving a single problem, but you actually get a very general set of capabilities out of it, and that makes it extremely exciting because other verticals can leverage that. And I think the particular phase that we're in now is in this interesting sort of handoff period where they function extremely well as like very helpful chatbots for individuals. And we have a question of how do we sort of hand off control for larger and larger scoped tasks in a way that's both still gives us the kind of oversight that we ultimately need for these systems, but also allows us to sort of offload the more mundane or more painful parts of business processes. I like to think of it as sort of a little bit analogous to self-driving, where you'd like to just sort of let the language model steer, but obviously that's not doable. And the advantage, I think, with a lot of the applications of generative AI is that there is like a nice in between where you don't just have to turn control all the way over to the LLM and hope that it doesn't hit a pedestrian. Instead, you can sort of more gracefully manage that handoff, kind of get value along the way.
Cool. Well, then I'm going to start with what I think is a relative softball, but we'll kind of get more into it along the way. But companies aside, right, of where you work and all of that good stuff. But let's start with where we think the gaps are, right? And where are those glaring holes that kind of need to be filled? And I guess let's go Julianna first. Right? What are you kind of thinking?
Sure. My answer to that question is basically always data. There are always gaps in the data for building these systems, and that's typically what leads to any gaps in AI capabilities. So it's all about having the right data, and the right data is really almost all you need. So I think a lot of medicine and pathology specifically is a great example. Pathology was like a data desert a few years ago. So like a decade ago, you would have really struggled to get your hands on like 200 images, for example. And now it's kind of exploded to much more than that, but still very much growing. And so those medical imaging applications especially, but I think this applies to many other things, they're seeing data grow. And really that's going to make things ripe for growth in the coming years.
And then Julianna, right? Because all of us are not in that space. What has been the change over the last 10 years? Why has it been so significantly different?
I think there are multiple. One for pathology specifically is that these were glass slides a few years ago, like literally a tissue specimen sitting on a glass slide that you look at under a microscope. And the digitization process is just now starting in earnest. Some got started a few years ago, and I think in other areas of medicine and medical imaging, it's a lot of it has been just the critical nature of the field. It's been a little bit difficult to get going, I think, because of that. And I would say also that medical imaging is sort of lagging behind things like natural language, for example, because the nature of the data is so different. And I think it'll catch up. But we've seen that trend for, I think, a few years now, at least, if not longer, that vision applications sort of are following in the footsteps of the natural language.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's integrated as well, right? I'm sure that there's so many areas of language that kind of do integrate as well, and kind of to keep my thoughts out of it, because again, I'm speaking to the people who know more than myself. But let's go to Ted here for just a second. Ted, when we think about these gaps, where do you kind of see them as well? I know we're working in the cutting edge on your side, not that the rest of you are not, but kind of on these newer models. Like, where are we actually seeing these gaps go?
Yeah, I mean, personally, so I think I guess I view it from a lens of like which gaps are the most fruitful, as in which are the ones that we should be actively pursuing given what we know today. And I really do see them in this sort of, you hear the term agentic AI quite a bit these days. And I do think that that's actually a really important direction of research, which is, especially in the language model space, there's certainly headroom for making the models themselves better, but I think that there's also a tremendous amount of value in building the appropriate frameworks around them to enable them to retrieve contextually relevant knowledge at the right point in time to reduce hallucinations, enable this kind of multi-hop reasoning where you can reason about having incomplete information and then make a decision about whether to hand control back to the human, do things like that. And so I really think that there's certainly limitations in the underlying LLM itself, but I actually see the sort of lowest hanging fruit and the most exciting space right now as being in the sort of understanding of what should we build, or what control structures should we build around the language model. in order to enable different downstream applications.
Yeah. Okay. And I think that we'll get into something that you said so much heavier is, and Juliana, you had mentioned there too, is right, is do we have the right data, right? Is the framework kind of correct to kind of move forward
Yeah.
there? And I think we're going to get into that in just a second here as well. But Hunter, yeah, with the gaps that you're kind of seeing being in, the startup space, right? You don't have historically don't have the same capabilities, right? And the resources at times, right? To some of the large organizations. Sometimes you do. But when you think about the gaps, what kind of sticks out in the AI space right now?
Yeah, actually, I think a lot of those resource limitations are going away or being commoditized because we now have access to a lot of the same very powerful, very low cost models that everyone else does.
Yeah.
And as the generic foundational models, some that Ted may or may not be working on, become more and more powerful,
Easy,
we get to
Hunter.
leverage
Sorry,
we
go
get to
ahead.
leverage the same tech. But as far as the gaps, I certainly echo Juliana. Like the reason we have gaps is because we don't have training data. And Ted's notion that there's this gap between today as an assistant and tomorrow as an agent. Today as someone who's helping me or something that's helping me, and tomorrow as something that I can just turn a task over and say, "You take care of this," and I trust you that this job will be performed really, really well. In trying to find gaps and areas for new applications of AI, one, I don't know, maybe controversial way of looking at it is that all UI, all interfaces that you see are a failure of AI. Because if the AI knew what you wanted to do, it wouldn't need to give you these options and have these buttons and request your text. And so we could argue that all of those are gaps. And then if you want one sort of future looking thing, there's a lot of interest and research and work on humanoid robotics. Several companies trying to build this robot that looks like human. Well, one of the reasons they want to do this is because there's a whole lot of training data. If you can just watch how the humans do things, because we don't have the data. And as soon as we have a robot that can act like a human, I can record all you pesky humans and generate mountains and mountains of training data so that we can unlock these future capabilities.
Hunter, I like you. You stress me out a little bit sometimes. No, 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 Hunter, I'm going to stay with you for this exact reason. This is a question we were coming up with them beforehand. I wanted to hear, and feel free to go as deep or as shallow as you like here. But you did mention some things in there. But the overarching like headline, you turn on your news station. What's the fear, right? What's the fear when we think about why are some people afraid of this push a little bit? And you did mention a little bit in there, but I just want to ask it a little bit more directly before we move on to some questions for the other panelists.
We're afraid because reality is changing too fast and there's too much uncertainty about it. And potentially our news media is sensationalizing it to some degree. We are worried that the AI is going to take all of our jobs, and maybe to a lesser degree that the AI will just take over everything. Once they've got our jobs, why don't we just take over this whole planet, the Terminator scenario?
Okay. That's why I came to you.
Yeah. I don't buy it. I don't think that's where we're going by the Terminator scenario by any means. I think we're currently in a phase of, wildly multiplying our own productivity. Will this lead to some job loss in some sectors, as every other technology advancement has? Yes. Will it also create new opportunities? Yes. How will these balance out? A little bit TBD. Yep. There's some scary things there, but I don't feel that we're on I don't feel like it's a tomorrow thing. I think it's like we're still like decade-ish from all transportation jobs cease to exist, all farming jobs cease to exist, and 10% of the workforce is gone, and maybe that's where some government regulation comes in to figure out those transitions. But that's what people are afraid of. I don't think they need to be nearly as afraid as some might suggest, but maybe others disagree.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that input, and I was kind of looking to you to kind of answer that, but I do want to kind of just move to Ted for a second here, because Ted, capacity that we've had the chance to work with is I did never had the chance to work with you at Uber, right? But extremely large and data rich organization, I would say, right from the outside. And then some smaller orgs, certainly data rich as well. My question is around like where are you seeing organizations, both big and small, going wrong in their kind of approach to AI, and then who's doing it well? Do you think like well, and yeah, I'll just leave it there before I kind of ask 17 follow-ups.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so based on my experience, I think pre-Anthropic, I would say maybe the biggest pitfall that I've seen organizationally is the sort of gap between expectations and reality. So you can imagine the transition from horse-drawn carriages to cars. It seems like it probably was smooth now, but the reality is there's probably a whole bunch of infrastructure out there that had to get totally rethought. All of a sudden when vehicles move faster, the roads have to be straighter. And so, it's not like you can, even if they were selling internal combustion engines, you wouldn't unlock all the value that we get out of cars today if you were trying to drive it around in an environment where there was, traffic moving at the speed of horse-drawn carriages. And so I think, part of the reason that there's been this sort of explosion of hype that everyone's talking about is because it's actually very easy to get a very impressive prototype going with a lot of these systems because they do have a lot of baked in knowledge and all of that. But then the sort of recognition or realization that it's going to take a process of mutual adaptation between business processes and the technology in order to actually realize that value, in order to really turn over the controls and sort of let it move at full speed. And so there's often, from what I've seen, both a reasonably long development cycle in terms of software, but then also something of a mindset shift that has to happen before you can move from that sort of fuzzy demo to practical reality.
Yeah, and then just maybe a follow up here as well. And if you don't have input on this, completely get it. I think this might be from a recruiter lens, so I might have to take my recruiter hat off, which is probably the worst term that hiring managers in your shoes get to hear all day. But so I think that what we see so much is how many companies want to do just like what you said, Ted, is this keeping up with the Joneses effect. Our competitors doing it, and we have this expectation that is just not quite reality, right? They put people and they expect their data scientists to almost be wizards, is the way I would say it, right? They don't give them the resources, and I think what we saw when we started recruiting this, and I'm going to stop talking in a second here, but what we saw is people really attacked this as a data science problem at first. And I think the companies who we saw do it well at first, when we talk about a lot more within generative AI, is companies who put so much emphasis on their data infrastructure and put so much emphasis on making sure that this is an engineering issue, not just a data science problem, right? Julianna, you had said it earlier, but if the data is not there to get it right, it's going to go wrong. And so the expectation versus reality is something that just stuck out to me so heavily. And Juliana, with that being said, I do want to kind of come to you. Is there any organizations, big or small, do you think that are doing this really well? I know you've been at Proscia for such a long time, so I don't want to kind of I know that we have not gone around too much, but at the same time, is there any kind of thing that you would want to add here?
Yeah, I guess I don't know that I have a specific example of who's doing a really good job with this. It's kind of hard for me to I think for anyone actually,
that's fair.
From the outside looking at a company and say are you doing a good job at this? And I think everyone who experiences some success with AI is also experiencing failure. Every last company. Just take, Amazon's just walk out tech that's been in the news lately as one of many examples. But I think in general, companies who have put some investment into building up their AI resources in the past years, as we're talking about, it takes a lot more than meets the eye to put any one of these systems into practice. And if you've been sort of investing in AI and developing AI for a few years, you've learned those lessons probably the hard way. And I think those companies are in a better position to sort of to scale and move past those lessons.
And Juliana, just one quick follow up. When you said put, I think you said money, or I forget the word used, into their AI resources. You say AI resources like in an internal like state when you talk about a company? What are you kind of thinking of? What comes to mind when you say AI
I,
resources?
yeah, that's kind of an all-inclusive term, right? It's the data,
Yeah.
which is not a binary, by the way. Like data
Mhm.
is data can be very, very good in the same quantity as very, very bad data. And it's not at all a binary. But it's the data, it's the infrastructure, it's the pipelines to put everything together. It's the machines that you're working on or the cloud that you're working with. It's the people who are working on these things,
Yeah.
and really the rest of the company around it too. It's the data science department or whatever it is in any organization can't do this all alone. So yeah, it's everything.
Yeah. I love that, right? And when we kind of think of AI as kind of tangential to what the actual business is doing, that's where, at least from my side, we've seen companies haven't done it as well, right? If you're looking for that immediate ROI and they're not ready to go through those failures, we've kind of seen them kind of drop off as well, right? Being on our side. So I do want to kind of come to Hunter here just for a quick one. Is when companies are doing it well, let me shift my question around. Why do you think that they are doing it well? And it might have been already answered a little bit, but Hunter, the companies who are have a successful AI group or are getting the right kind of product out of it, why do you think that is?
So first, I think there's a point that AI really should be spread throughout the entire company. And I think the companies that
Hmm.
we can narrow in on engineering in a second. The companies that are doing it well are the companies that have policies that enable all employees to be leveraging, we'll just use the term AI, that they're actively
Hmm.
encouraging it, opposed to I see a lot of very prohibitive policies. You can't do this, you can't do that. Don't put anything into here. Oh, you're not allowed to use this, you're not allowed to use that. When like it's almost as if what if you weren't allowed to use spell checking? Like I think in the future it'll be the same as that. Like okay, now like no one use spell check. You have to look everything up in the dictionary or just use your own knowledge of spelling. So the companies that are doing it right are the companies that have very sort of proactive policies about how their employees are able to leverage AI tooling for enhanced productivity so that the company can do more better. um, and I don't see enough of that. For
Yeah.
the engineering organizations, I think it's the companies that are adopting very. So we talked about the explosive growth. Things are changing constantly. The more model agnostic architectures where they're able to swap models in and out as things are rapidly changing, and they're constantly thinking about multimodal. It's not just one foundational model to rule them all. Uh, those are the ones that I see moving up the ladder the quickest because they have the flexibility that it allows, and
Hmm.
they're not just doing things the old way.
Yeah. Okay. No, and I think I wish I saw the spelling check, like the teacher said no using spell check for you. I'm sure that conversation went well, but no, I appreciate that, and I think Hunter, I'm really curious for you kind of on this next one, because knowing what I know about Anteros and how many different organizations kind of are interacting with Anteros, right? And like you're getting all types of industries here. I want to kind of talk about a question specifically around an industry side of things. So when it comes to what industries do you feel are realizing the benefits from the role of AI, and then I guess on the other side, which ones are probably a little bit slower to adapt when you think about from an industry perspective?
So obviously, first technology companies in the AI space, like an Anthropic, are
Hmm.
leveraging this moment to uh, incredible return. We could look at where companies are laying off employees because they're suggesting that they can be replaced by AI or they are being replaced by AI. Although I'll also note I have a degree of skepticism around those statements, and I wonder to what degree it's just the current economic conditions and a convenient excuse and a plan for the future that all right, well, we'll figure out a way of augmenting these others with AI in the future. Um, I think companies around data labeling, if you want sort of a very specific example, are being very negatively impacted. You would think so. We're talking about having data is the lifeblood of AI, but we've also gotten really good at labeling data, leveraging AI. And because I work with several data labeling companies, they're getting way less business. People are using these large language models to label their data sets and getting pretty good results, and generating synthetic data, fake data, with these large language models. And so data labeling and those types of tasks, there's definitely been a significant decline that I do think is legitimately attributed towards advances in AI.
And, and how about on the other side, right? When we think about the industries, or I think you had mentioned it already, but realizing the benefits, is there? Let's go in a more positive direction for just a second here before we bring to our other panelists. I appreciate the skepticism, but is there any industries that you think are really benefiting from these roles of AI? And I know you kind of touched on it a second there as well.
I mean, so it's like, what's the list of things that's gotten better recently with AI, and how does that impact? Sorry, so
Yeah.
sorting of data, labeling of data. I mean, basically every industry should be able to be impacted by the potential productivity gains. I don't think there's ones that
That's fair.
that specifically call out. Media companies seem sort of next up at bat with all of the sort of recent revelations of what's coming next with audio generation, video generation, really incredible editing. But I'll leave it there. I'll pass. I pass to my peers.
Okay, perfect. Well then, as would love to hear what one of your peers, Ted. What do you think when we think about what industries are realizing these benefits from AI? I have a couple in mind, but curious to hear from yours, especially from a more like language element.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, just based on the sort of trends that I was seeing before I joined Anthropic, I think the one of the big industries that it seems to me, as Hunter said, is kind of up at bat next, is a lot of customer support, customer success functions. Those can be handled with language models. So it seems like that's nice because it as a sort of application area, because I think it really does leverage the sort of linguistic interaction component. It's like a fairly straightforward transition from the chatbots that are fairly mature today into, hooking it into a database and giving it a certain set of functions to sort of allow it to initiate a return or things like that. And so that seems like a clear sort of next step, in terms of industries that can leverage this stuff in the short run, sort of in a very clearly consumer facing manner. And then I also think this is more just like a general function across companies. A big application area that I was excited about was onboarding new employees. So, it seems like if you have an internal knowledge base and you have a sort of structured set of things that you need new employees to learn, why you can't have a spin-up buddy who's an AI assistant that can sort of interactively talk to you about the company values or, relevant information about certain procedures, or even quiz you and make sure that you actually understand it, give you thought experiments or whatnot. That seems like a sort of very valuable potential, and then transition into sort of watching you do the task a couple times, making sure you really understand it, and then kind of stepping out. That seems like a very useful general thing across a lot of spaces.
I love that example.
I mean, for
someone, I mean,
I'm curious on the customer support example.
Yeah.
Customer support is kind of like, I don't know, an awful hellhole if you ask me. And so
in terms of end UX.
Yeah, and like what it feels like today, talking to these chatbots. And so certainly with retrieval, augmented generation, we can generate better answers. But do you feel like we're actually close to it? Feel like I just want to talk to a human? Is it gonna feel like that, or is it just gonna be slightly better?
I think you earlier were saying that like one of the cool things about these systems is it feels like talking to a human, right?
For a little bit, just
So one thing to think about is like
pesky, but you want to talk to them?
Guys, should I leave?
At times, I want to talk with them.
Maybe we should get Claude in here to like tell us. Yeah. So I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I think you're right that there's a lot of like scorched earth in terms of like customer expectations around what that little dialogue box in the corner really means on a website. They're terrible frequently, but truthfully, I'm going to take some shots here. Like I've had an Alexa and I've had a Google Home and I've like had Siri on my phone for a really long time, and I do not use any of them, right? So the fact that there was a failed linguistic interface there before, I think doesn't mean that can't or shouldn't be revisited. It might, you might have some people who will never click that little chatbot thing. But I do, I guess maybe to answer your question, I do believe that the fundamental technology exists to deliver a really delightful end user experience without engaging a human for the vast majority of standard customer support interactions, which are currently handled in a more painful offline way, either with some dialogue tree in a chatbot or, through a more painful chat interface that's high latency with a real human.
I'll look forward to it.
Yeah, that's just my guess. No, I mean, other smart people are working on it, not me.
Thank you, Ted.
Perfect. Well then, if Ted's not working on it, we should not. No, no, I'm good on there. But I do want to kind of get into, because I know that this is some people's kind of specialty within this call as well, around like safety, and making sure that things are working the right way. And so, Julianna, I would love to kind of start with you here. And it's the word guarantee is kind of a unique one in here, but it says guarantee. But how can we kind of guarantee the safety and security of AI systems, right? Especially as they become a lot more autonomous, right? And so you can choose to switch out guarantee if you'd like, but when we think about that question, what kind of comes to mind here?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'll play with the word guarantee.
Okay.
But yeah, I think critical tasks like ones in the healthcare and biotech space, I don't think we're typically we're not typically talking about AI systems being autonomous or making decisions on their own. We're typically talking about systems that have a human in the loop somewhere. And I think even for the vast majority of other use cases, that's what we're talking about too. But even something as simple as like screening scanned images to make sure they're good quality, which is something that we do at Proscia, that needs someone to make sure, at least at some point, that it's working properly. And the only way you do that is testing. So like, it's the same way that I know my toddler can go down the stairs safely, like without holding my hand. I've spotted her, supervised her, doing it hundreds of times. She's been safe. Like I've tested her, right? And that is the only way that we know that AI is doing what it's supposed to do too. So you do that, you test both before you put that solution into practice, and probably with some monitoring after you put it into place at some type of interval, depending on what it is.
I love that. I appreciate the kind of metaphor, making it digestible as well, Juliana. That's super helpful. I mean, honestly, right, for my side, and I think that just from like, again, the recruiter side of things, like making things that people can understand, right? When we think about people who interview all the time and how sometimes with non-technical folk, I think it's so important to make these ideas they're really complicated and times are extremely digestible. So I appreciate that. But Ted, I do want to kind of come to you here for a second. What are you laughing about?
Well, I love the example, but it's funny because like my wife and I are in disagreement about whether our toddler can successfully go down the stairs safely. And so there's like, and then also, he's fine until he gets excited about something. And then, it's all bets are off. Yeah. So, I agree.
I'm sure too, you would never get excited. I'm sure that you never, ever have like an excitement issue.
Or freak out or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I think the unfortunate reality is that reasonably people can, faced with the same evidence, disagree about the sort of conclusions that are licensed by it in terms of like what a system is capable of doing. And so the sort of framework that I like to use for this kind of stuff is the basic idea of a safety case. And so this is like the safety case sort of methodology is employed in automotive industries and aviation. I don't know, maybe in medical as well. I'm not actually sure. But the basic idea is that you make a structured argument backed by data, quantitative, about the deployment scenarios that a system is qualified for. And you sort of, enumerate the testing that you've done, to Juliana's point, whatever monitoring, whatever ongoing visibility. And you present that to a trusted third party, like, an official US, NTSB or what have you. And you can get certified that your system is safe to deploy according to this regulatory body. And so, obviously the word guarantee is just not something that we can transact with in the real world.
That's my bad.
No. But the question is, well, what guarantees are appropriate then? And the answer is having this agreed upon, maybe we'll talk about this later, there's sort of regulatory bodies that sort of have a process in place that society agrees is sufficient to drive risk down to an acceptable level. And then it really is all about matching the actual deployment to those frameworks and saying, okay, given what I know about the system, the toddler is capable of going down the stairs, provided like loud noises don't occur suddenly or what have you. And then you bear the responsibility for ensuring that your deployment matches those criteria.
That's awesome. No, I love the adding on to that metaphor. So, Hunter, I'm not going to ask you to completely add on to the metaphor, but I definitely want to hear your thoughts when it comes to like the around the safety and security of AI systems, like especially when we talk about as they become more autonomous. Is there anything that you kind of see as guarantees the wrong word, ensuring getting to the best of their abilities, creating safety?
Yeah, it's not a death and taxes thing. There's no guarantees.
Sure ain't. No.
Yeah, we set up guardrails. I mean, I think that's what everyone else is talking about.
Yep.
And I think that the way that we build guardrails will continue to evolve, and we'll continue to leverage more things like large language models to be separate guardrail systems to take a look at the output and make sure that things make sense before they go through. But yeah, we'll inevitably, they call them jailbreaks. We'll inevitably figure out ways to get output that we shouldn't get out, and we'll continue to hallucinate, and we'll continue to mess things up. I think there's also something there about more education around probabilistic output. What does it mean when you get an answer from this, and how should you think about it as someone who's interacting with it? And it'll continue to get better and better and better. But no, you shouldn't go file your legal brief with the raw output from Ted's latest release of Opus. It's going to be really great, but there's probably something in it that shouldn't be in there.
I'm going to just move on. I think.
Okay.
I'm going to say that's a deployment scenario that we certainly haven't approved. So,
yeah, not going to touch that one. But I do want to kind of we're in a last little sprint here because there is a couple of things that I want to make sure and that we kind of talk about for people who are listening, right? Because we haven't talked about this too much, but from an audience standpoint of who we have probably on this today, is anything from people looking to change their job, people looking to grow their team, to people trying to get into the space as a whole. And so with that being said, I'm going to do a quick little shameless plug of Harnham, and I'm going to move on so quickly that you guys aren't even going to notice it happen. But every single year we do a Harnham salary guide. And so what that salary guide does is we have thousands of people who click on it, who kind of give us more information, right? Talk about, and it's completely anonymous, but the reality is it really helps it helps hiring managers kind of benchmark for their team how much it's going to cost, and for candidates to kind of see what are the leading trends in the space, as well as what is their fair value based on what other organizations are doing. And so we are releasing our salary survey as well, and we'll give a chance for everybody who's listening to this to kind of participate if they see fit. It's really, 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 the salary guide is such an awesome use case that we see tons of clients and candidates kind of use. So I'll kind of move away from that really quickly, but I do kind of want to stay on a similar theme here. And we might be going back to a question in a second, but I do want to ask around these kind of regulations and kind of governing of something that is happening so quickly, right? And so I do want to kind of just stick with Ted for 1 second here. And Ted, when we think about what frameworks and regulations are needed to govern the development, deployment, and use of AI technologies, and then I'm probably going to have a follow-up more around like how do we foster growth while also making sure that we're making the right decisions around these spaces. So I do kind of want to just start with you on that and see where you take that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, well, first of all, let me say, I think maybe one of the most important things is I'm not actually a good person to ask because I'm working on the technology.
Awesome.
I really think it's ultimately a societal level question of like what role should these systems play and how should we even conceptualize them. And so, I'll just say from a very personal perspective, one of the reasons that I did join Anthropic was because I do appreciate the extent to which we are doing outreach and working to try to educate policymakers on the technology itself in order to sort of not have us be some set of wizards in San Francisco working on wizardly things, but actually participating in disseminating information around the capabilities and risks and all of that, because it can and should be a democratic process. We live in a democracy, and the more that people understand what's happening and they can sort of provide a perspective on how they think it should exist, the better. So that's sort of maybe a procedural view on the thing. In terms of the like functional structure or like how to actually go about regulating AI, I do think that you want to put careful criteria around who bears responsibility for deployments and what sort of acceptable risks are and all of that. And I think that you can, my hope or I don't work on this directly, but my hope is that, we could get to a world where we can enumerate the sort of acceptable or desired characteristics of systems in the same way that you say, airplanes have certain acceptable failure rates, and then mandate certain checks that are necessary for a deployed system in a way that doesn't actually impede people from developing those systems. So, you don't regulate how you research the technology, you regulate what the sort of deployed end product has to look like. And that hopefully can allow innovation while still ensuring that whatever actually impacts society is sort of handled in the way that you think is going to guarantee good results.
Yeah, I mean, something to be said for even the way you started that. I mean, I think honestly, it's so humanized. Is that the word? But it makes you want to listen when people say, "Hey, this maybe not be my strong suit," but actually speaking about something that you are passionate about, right? And it makes me want to listen. That was one of my favorite answers all day. Ted, so I really appreciate that. And Juliana agrees with me. So with that being said, Juliana, I'm gonna come to you next, right? And I can repeat the question, but it's mostly around like regulations and what's need to kind of govern AI successfully while also kind of striking that balance between fostering innovation and ensuring like the responsible use of AI when it comes to, and if you want to speak passionately like Ted, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Sorry.
First, I want to say I really agree with Ted's point, especially that we don't need to regulate like the inner workings and research and development of these systems as much as we need to regulate what they're doing. We need to regulate their output. And I think my maybe unpopular opinion about this is that I don't think we should regulate AI differently than we regulate other systems. Now, it doesn't mean that like I'm totally happy with today's regulations everywhere and things are great already. But the way I see it, like we're going to do things with AI systems that we already do or that we're going to do with other systems too. And those systems might include people in them, right? Whether or not they include AI. And that regulation, I think, needs to be the same. It needs to be fair across whether you're using AI or not.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to accomplish. It's really hard to accomplish. And so like Ted said, we need to work. We need regulatory bodies. We need governments working together with the organizations that are developing AI in order to really do this well and to accomplish that.
Yeah, and I think for both of you, what I like again is that we're speaking kind of like as practitioners, but not just from a company perspective, right? That there's people who generally care about the space, and I appreciate where you're coming from, Juliana, and then Hunter, I do want to kind of come with you as far as like same question again as far as these frameworks and regulations. That where do we kind of strike that balance? I know it's not an extremely clear question, but from your perspective, how do we strike this balance?
Yeah, I don't love a lot of regulation, Sam.
Yeah.
But is there a need for it at all? I mean, we can't let the AI destroy society. So potentially there's something there. I just hope that we don't, in software development, we talk about, preemptive optimization. Like, don't spend a lot of time optimizing it super early on. Get your first product together and then start thinking about how do we optimize and make it faster, better. We don't yet have any systems that are going to absolutely destroy society. I hope that we don't make a bunch of rules about them now that stop us from advancing the technology. We can definitely start thinking about them and what should happen if tomorrow all transportation jobs and all farm jobs can be automated for pennies on the dollar, then yeah, maybe there should be a regulatory framework on how we roll out that technology in a sustainable way so that our society, just doesn't, collapse overnight. I don't think anybody wants that, but
Yeah.
shouldn't put a bunch of rules in place. And then on the good side, we probably need some legislation around who takes on the risk of these models in order for them to fully reach their potential. We're going to have self-driving cars everywhere. Who's responsible? And maybe it should have some government-y involvement if we can say that it's 100 times safer than a human driver.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we should have some laws.
Hunter, you kind of reminded me, and when you kind of spoke about that, and again, we're almost finishing up here, but Hunter, I think that what I've enjoyed with speaking with you in this panel is that you're actually coming with a point of view, like, and making it extremely obvious of kind of where you sit in all of this. And I say that, no, I mean, I say that to say,
Yeah,
right, I just plugged Harnham side. If you want to take a second, I'm sure that it'll be in the comments here, but if you want to have these conversations and hear these conversations go a little further along with, and this is obviously about your podcast now, but Hunter, if you want to kind of just give it a quick shout before we kind of move to these last two.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I do a podcast where we talk about a lot of these AI issues. It's called They Might Be Self-Aware. It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. So yeah, feel free to tune in.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that. And then I guess I just want to kind of finish out here with some of the two final questions and give yourselves a chance to kind of speak about anything we maybe didn't touch on. But Hunter, I guess we'll stay with you for a second. Simple, but I think pretty whole question here. Is there anything AI can't do that you would like to see made possible in the we'll start with near future.
In the near future.
You can expand it further if you want, but
yeah. What I really want is an incredible AI assistant for all of these video conferencing calls. First, I want a photorealistic avatar representation of me, so I don't have to actually be on video. I can just talk, but you think I'm on video.
Damn it, Hunter.
Number one. Number two, whenever I get asked a question, pop up the likely answers for me. And number three, suggest questions that I should ask to keep going. This is all possible with today's technology. Someone just needs to glue it together, and then they can sell it to me. I'll be your first customer.
I love that. I love that. Julianna?
I like that. Hunter answered from a personal perspective. I wasn't thinking about it that way. But that's awesome. I guess from my perspective, I don't know about something that I can't do, but something I'm excited to see going forward is having AI design drugs actually make it to patients. I know there's been a lot of work in that area recently and some excellent progress in sort of identifying drug targets and developing and identifying compounds to treat diseases using AI. And that's making things go a lot faster. That should bring treatments to patients a lot faster and maybe for rarer diseases than were typically cost effective before. So that's something cool. I saw a recent series for Data IQ on that, and that's something cool to check out if you're interested.
I love that. And I think that the cool thing about this question is I did so my parents have no idea what I do, and Ted, we're going to get to in 1 second. But my parents have no idea. They don't get this job at all, and that's fine. And so I think whenever I bring up my job at home, which is probably says more about my father and my family than me. He says, when can you get someone in there who can help me handicap a horse race, which is probably the worst use of this at all, but and probably something that, my boss and managers don't want to hear. But until that happens, I don't think that he's going to learn what I do, but I still love him. So Ted, in the worst transition ever, anything that AI can't do that you would like to see possible in the near future?
Yeah, well, I mean, I thought
better than Lou Agre's response.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully it's much better than Lou Agre's. Go ahead.
So, I mean, Hunter, I thought yours was kind of funny because one of the things that I care, or that I think would be super interesting, both personally and professionally, is around sort of understanding how AI thinks. The general field of model interpretability is super concerned with that. So, in my PhD, I was sort of hanging out with one of my friends in neuroscience, and we were talking about we really want to understand language in the brain, but obviously the brain is sort of logistically challenging to study because people don't like it when you put little sharp things in it and record electrical signals. So you wind up with a lot of really noisy fMRI data, and it's sort of very difficult to disentangle and everything. And so I was like, hey man, this thing BERT just came out. Could we do something cool with that? And basically what it turned out was people had done all of this interpretability work on BERT, which is this nice model system. You can put a bunch of input through it. You can study exactly sort of what activation patterns fire. And so it became this like little unit of study in and of itself. And we were able to take some of the tools that people used on BERT and say, okay, let's look at fMRI data and actually link components of the transformer model to certain brain regions in just like a very fun, cool way. And so I do think that as our science of interpretability in transformers gets better, we'll get a lot of interesting results around, you'll get better sort of knowledge citation. It should be able to explain, the model itself should be able to introspect and tell you why it produced a certain input in a causal manner. I mean, these are causal models. And so really understanding how we want to represent that internal feature space back to people in a way that allows them to introspect and gain this sort of more intuitive understanding, I think personally is both super cool because I care about language use as a cognitive scientist. And these are a fantastic example of that you can study in silica. But also because it would have all sorts of downstream ramifications for trusting the model and things like that.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. So I do just want to. Oh, we're almost there. And I know we're kind of closing out on time. Is there anything that people maybe want to clear up? Anything that they want to get across while you do still have the floor for just a couple minutes? That isn't really a question, but is there anything that maybe didn't come out of this conversation that you just want to get across? Maybe it's about your organization, but just want to open the floor to anybody if they have any kind of final thoughts here before I let you guys go.
I would just I would suggest that everyone get out there and play. Start playing with the tech. Like if you're not, it's so much cool. And the barrier to entry has gotten so low. Like everyone can do it and start. And then when you get far enough, then spend some time to try to figure out how it's actually working. But just start playing.
Yeah.
Hunter, go ahead, Julianna. Sorry, I'd rather hear from you.
I don't do that. Yeah, I think absolutely that's a great thing to do. And it's going to keep people getting easier and easier for people to play. Like the barrier to entry, as you said, is getting lower and lower. But don't wait. Get started.
I agree. And I would also say it's worth just taking swings at trying to do things that you think maybe it couldn't. Like I was playing with a prototype version of Opus at one point. Claude 3 Opus is our latest, biggest model. And I was sort of just playing with it. And I took a photo. I'm into Ikebana, which is Japanese flower arrangement. So I took a picture of my Ikebana composition and I was like, hey, can you critique this? And it produced like a technically accurate critique of things that I had gotten wrong because I didn't have the right equipment. It was just like, I completely was not expecting that to work. And so I would say it's worth just trying stuff. Honestly, it's hard to predict what these things can do well.
I love that. And it brings me to my complete last question here. And you did already answer it. So Hunter, I appreciate you getting ahead of it and kind of the perfect segue. But for people listening, what should people do if they want to get into the AI space? And, I want to kind of just leave it completely there. I know you did just mention it a little bit, but if people are trying to get involved from a degree background to a company, whatever it is, any advice that you would kind of give people to kind of get further into the space?
Number 1, start playing. Number 2, if you're targeting a specific company, play with ideas in their space. Like that's the thing that the advice I give to people applying for jobs, build something that kind of seems like it would belong there. And with AI, you can do it even faster now. And then once you have this stuff and you have something cool, try to spend some time figuring out how does it actually work. Start looking at the computer science behind it. And there's definitely still value in pursuing a computer science degree and a higher level computer science degree and actually understanding it all, but you don't have to. It's a choice.
Awesome. Ted, I heard you saying something really quickly, and then Julianna, I'd love for you to close us out.
Just to echo what Hunter said, I think, if you're not working full time somewhere, then finding side projects and things like that. If you are working full time somewhere, then I would just ask, is there anything that you could do that might be interesting with language models that would help the business? Maybe it's a little bit out of your current, mandate or whatever, but you can leverage the sort of drive to use AI for everything to get experience with AI in whatever your current role is, or you might be able to. It's worth the thought.
I love that. Julianna?
Yeah,
bring us home.
So as not to repeat Hunter and Ted's points, which I agree with, I would say something that I don't hear often, which is practice communicating. If that is not something that is your strong suit, as it wasn't for me, that is probably, I would say, the biggest barrier for entry to anybody doing this. Is if you can't communicate well, you're not going to get very far on your own. So that's something I would say for people in the space or who want to get into the space.
Awesome. Well, I think we're gonna end there. You three are so the highest compliment I say I give to my team, you guys three are so badass. I was so appreciative of the fact that you guys joined and were able to like really make some cool ideas, as well as communicate with each other and kind of speak passionately and so intelligently about the subject. So I'm so appreciative of you three as well as everybody for tuning in, and can't wait to hopefully do this again. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode, brought to you by the Harnham Group. We'd love it if you would share the podcast on social media and leave a comment or a review to help us reach a bigger audience. If your company is having difficulty finding skilled data professionals, you can rely on the global leader in data and analytics recruitment, staffing and talent development to assist you with your hiring needs. Find out more at www.harnham.com. Thank you for listening.